I agreed to an open marriage, then found out she was cheating before it even started. I always thought my relationship with Emma was rock solid. We had been married for 6 years, and despite the usual ups and downs that come with any long-term relationship, I never questioned our bond. We had built a life together, moved into a beautiful house, traveled the world, supported each other through career changes, health scares, and family issues. There was nothing that seemed like it could come between us, at least, that's what I believed. But then, one night, Emma dropped a bombshell that I wasn't expecting. We were sitting on the couch after dinner, drinking a glass of wine, when she casually mentioned, "What would you think about having an open marriage?" At first, I laughed. An open marriage? You mean like those people we see on TV who share everything with everyone? She chuckled, but there was something in her eyes that told me this wasn't a joke. Not exactly, she said softly. I've been thinking a lot about us lately. I feel like we're starting to drift apart in some ways. We're still close, but we're not as close as we used to be. Maybe opening things up could help. It might bring a little spark back, you know? I was stunned. Emma, are you serious? We've been together for 6 years, and now you want to add something like this into the mix? I didn't know how to react. The idea was so foreign to me. Sure, we'd had our moments of tension. Who doesn't? But it never felt like something that would threaten the core of our relationship. The thought of her with someone else made my stomach churn. But Emma wasn't asking me for permission to cheat. She was asking if I'd be open to exploring new things, together. Maybe it was just a phase, a midlife crisis for her? She continued, I'm not asking for us to change everything. We'll still be together, still have our relationship. But what if we both explored things outside of it? It could bring us closer, like a reset. Don't you think we could use a little excitement? I sat there, feeling the weight of her words. The idea was crazy, but the more I thought about it, the more I understood where she was coming from. The truth was, we had been growing apart in some small ways. We weren't fighting, but we weren't exactly thriving either. The spark that had once defined us felt dim, buried under the weight of routine and comfort. After a long pause, I said, I don't know. I'm not sure about all of this, Emma, but she kept pushing. Think about it, no pressure. It's just an idea. We can set boundaries, ground rules. We don't even have to go through with it if you're not comfortable. But if we're being honest with ourselves, we both need something more. I felt conflicted. Part of me wanted to shut it down immediately, but another part of me felt like I was losing touch with the person I married. So after hours of talking, negotiating boundaries, and trying to figure out if it would work for both of us, I agreed. It didn't feel good, but it didn't feel bad either. I agreed because I didn't want to lose Emma, and if this was what it would take to bring some excitement back into our lives, then maybe I was willing to try. Maybe we could both find fulfillment in new ways and still keep our core intact. Maybe we could even come out stronger. But as the days passed, doubts started to creep in. The arrangement was in place, and the first few weeks felt surreal. Emma and I had set some pretty clear boundaries. We would both date other people, but we would always communicate openly about it. There would be no secrets, no lies, no surprises. As strange as it felt, it was clear that we were on the same page, or so I thought. But something started to shift. Slowly, at first, Emma started staying out later than usual. I told myself it was nothing. She was just getting into the swing of things. Maybe she was out on dates, meeting people, enjoying herself. And for a while, I told myself that was exactly what I was doing too. But there was something about her late nights that felt different. It was the little things at first. She stopped texting me as often when she was out. She was quieter when she got home, like she was hiding something. And there was the look in her eyes, that smile that didn't quite reach her face. The kind of smile someone gives when they're trying to convince themselves that everything is fine, even when it's not. One night, Emma came home especially late. It was after midnight, and she was buzzed, laughing a little too loudly as she entered the house. I was already in bed, reading, but I pretended to be asleep. I wanted to see how she'd act when she thought I wasn't paying attention. She kicked off her shoes and headed straight for the bathroom. After a few minutes, she came out and found me still reading. How was your night? I asked, trying to sound casual. Her response was swift, almost rehearsed. It was fine, she said with a smile that didn't sit right. Just a casual dinner, nothing special. I nodded but couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. Her smile seemed too wide, too forced, like she was hiding something. The suspicions grew stronger each day. I started paying more attention to the details, the way she answered my questions, the way her phone seemed to vibrate more often than usual, the random late-night texts I saw her respond to in the kitchen when she thought I wasn't looking. But I still tried to trust her. After all, she was my wife. We had agreed on this open marriage together. So why was I feeling like I was losing her in ways I couldn't understand? Then one afternoon, I found something I shouldn't have. It was a message on her phone, a message that shattered everything. I had picked up her phone to look up something, and that's when I saw it. A thread of texts between Emma and a guy the first didn't recognize. The messages were older than I realized, and they were intimate. Too intimate. They weren't just casual conversations, they were messages exchanged in the early days of our open marriage discussions. The worst part? They were from months before we ever talked about opening our relationship. I stared at the screen, my heart racing, my mind trying to make sense of it. The messages weren't innocent, they were filled with passion, jokes, plans to meet up. A full-on affair, and it had started before Emma even mentioned the idea of an open marriage to me. I was in shock. How could she have been seeing someone else before we even had this conversation? How could she lie to me like this? I don't know how long I stood there, holding her phone in my hand, staring at the messages. My mind raced in 100 different directions. I could feel the blood rush to my head, my hands trembling, my heart pounding. The only thing I could focus on was the fact that Emma had been seeing someone else before we even made the decision to have an open marriage. I wanted to throw the phone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront her, right then and there. But I didn't. Instead, I slipped the phone back where I had found it and tried to act normal when she came back into the room. But the anger was building inside me, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Emma, I said, my voice strained. We need to talk. She looked at me, startled by the serious tone in my voice. What's going on? She asked, her eyes flicking toward the couch where I was sitting. Why didn't you tell me about him? I asked quietly, my voice shaky with the mix of betrayal and hurt. Her face went pale, and I saw the panic flicker in her eyes. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, the words coming out sharper now. The messages. The ones you sent to that guy. The ones from before we even talked about this whole open marriage idea. For a moment, she was silent. She didn't try to deny it. I watched her struggle to find the right words, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Finally, she spoke, her voice low, almost apologetic. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she said, trailing off as though she wasn't sure how to continue. I felt a coldness settle over me as I processed her words. So, you were already cheating on me, even before we had this conversation about opening things up? How long has this been going on, Emma? Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw something in her that I hadn't noticed before, a weakness, a vulnerability. She was trapped, cornered by the truth she couldn't escape. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It just happened. I never meant to hurt you. I laughed bitterly, unable to control myself. You didn't mean to hurt me? You were already sleeping with someone else while I was sitting here thinking we were in this together. You lied to my face, Emma. You lied to me about everything. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't feel any sympathy. Not anymore. I didn't want you to feel like this. I wanted us to be okay. I wanted to make it work, but I didn't know how. So I thought, maybe if I had an outlet for my needs, it would help. I never meant to go behind your back. Her words were hollow now. I could tell she was trying to make excuses, but none of them made sense. Nothing would ever make sense again. How could you do this? I asked, feeling a mix of disbelief and fury. How could you betray me like this, before we even agreed to open up our marriage? You didn't give me a choice, Emma. You just went ahead and did it. And now you want to apologize? She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away, not wanting to be touched. I'm so sorry, she repeated, her voice breaking. I don't know what came over me. I never wanted to hurt you, but it was too late for apologies. The damage had been done, and I wasn't sure I could ever undo the knot of betrayal in my chest. The next few days were a blur. The house felt too quiet, too empty, even though Emma was still here, walking around like a ghost, trying to make sense of the wreckage we had both created. But no amount of talking could fix what had happened. I couldn't shake the feeling of being betrayed in the worst possible way. She didn't just cheat on me. She deceived me, and worse, she had done it before we ever even agreed to open our marriage. That wasn't just infidelity, it was a complete disregard for everything we had built together. We tried to talk, tried to work through the mess, but every conversation felt like a loop of the same painful admissions and weak apologies. I couldn't stop asking myself how I got here. How did I end up in a relationship where trust was shattered, where the foundation had cracked under the weight of lies? I started pulling away emotionally, even though I didn't want to. The idea of sharing my life with someone who had already lied to me so profoundly made me sick to my stomach. I tried to be civil, to act like we could move past this, but I couldn't look at her without seeing the lies, the secrets, the pain she had caused. There was no going back. There was no fixing it. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself thinking about how everything had gone so wrong. How did we get here? What went wrong between us? We had built something beautiful, something I thought was unbreakable. Yet, somehow, it had all fallen apart in the span of a few misguided decisions. I kept asking myself if I should have seen it coming. Maybe Emma's suggestion about an open marriage had been a red flag all along. Maybe she had been feeling dissatisfied for longer than I realized. But the truth was, I hadn't wanted to see it. I hadn't wanted to face the possibility that things might not be as perfect as I had convinced myself they were. But the betrayal, finding out that she had already been seeing someone before we even discussed the idea, was something I never saw coming. It was a painful wake-up call, one that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and commitment. I spent nights lying awake, wondering if I would ever be able to trust anyone again. How could I trust anyone after what Emma had done? The relationship with Emma didn't survive. I moved out of the house a month later, and we never really spoke again after that. I tried to move on, tried to find peace with everything that had happened, but it wasn't easy. The scars ran deep. In the end, I learned the hard way that sometimes, no matter how hard we try to make things work, trust once broken can never be fully restored. You can try to patch things up, but some cracks will always remain. And as I sit here now, reflecting on everything, I still find myself asking that one question: how did I get here?